let's move on to section B of the paper. So again, if you click on FM2, British and American Cinema, well, actually before we do that, we'll look at the exam paper itself under General, Past Papers, and let's look at the same paper we looked at before, Summer 2012. And if you scroll through to section B, the choice of questions here is 3 or 4. So for section A it's 1 or 2, for section B it's 3 or 4. So British film and genre is a topic that we've studied, and we're focusing on the comedy genre rather than horror. So you can ignore all the other questions in section B. Okay, it's just question 3 or 4, and then section C will be question 15 or 16. So you've got a choice of 2 questions. If we go back onto Moodle to see what sort of questions tend to come up, so let's go on to the FM2 folder now, section B. So this gives you an overview of what you need to demonstrate for this part of the course. Focus on narrative, genre conventions of comedy films, representations of concept, notions of Britishness, and what constitutes British humour. If you're looking at for a more specific idea about what comes up in the exam, as well as looking at past papers, if you look on these slides here, you'll see these are the sorts of questions that tend to come up. Sometimes you'll get a specific question on one of these concepts, sometimes you'll get a question that is a combination of 2, so it might be, say, genre and narrative, or gender and messages and values, for example. But as part of your revision, it's important that you have an understanding of how these concepts apply to the films you're studying, either Submarine and Albatross or Life of Brian and Four Lions. Okay. Also, I'll just go back to these slides actually. Also on here, you've got some key theory. So for comedy films, it's important that you're familiar with the ideas of Gerald Mast, the 8 comic plots, so make sure you're familiar with those as part of your revision and think about how they apply to the films you've studied. Also the ideas of Jerry Palmer, so the idea that narrative structure is important to comedy films, the idea individual scenes kind of function like a joke with a setup and a punchline, the idea that comedy is where you've got a greater amount of implausibility as opposed to a drama, so implausible situations create humour, for example. These are all ideas that you should be able to apply to your analysis of the 2 films. What's obviously very important for section B is that you are familiar with the films you're studying. So if you're with me, it'll be Submarine and Albatross, 2 coming of age comedies. With John, it's Life of Brian and Four Lions, 2 satirical comedies. So as part of your revision, make sure you re-watch both films in their entirety. Also focus on some of the key scenes that we've chaptered for each film, which will give you an idea about the examples you could discuss in the exam. It's very important for section B that you're able to refer to examples to support your argument. So you really need to know the films inside out. What you've also got for section B is a bank of resources here that will be useful. In particular, I draw your attention to some of the stuff on exam technique. So this document here goes through different types of questions that are likely to come up in the exam, so read through those, and also gives you an idea about how to approach them. Then you've got more sort of technical advice. If we go back to that link, technical advice here about how to plan your response for section B. Okay, so in particular, establishing an argument, which is really important. It's important for all parts of the paper. Making sure you support points with examples. So what you can do is go through some past papers and just think about planning out an answer, but also thinking about the points you would make in your answer and how you develop that point with reference to examples from the films. As you can see, so that's an example of an essay plan. As you can see with these examples here. So you've got the point, the example, and the summary. Okay, so part of your revision is kind of practicing that kind of technique and building your confidence in terms of writing at length in exam conditions. Okay, so it's as much about your knowledge of the films is important, your knowledge of the concepts is important, but also it's about developing your skills in terms of exam conditions. Okay, so look for your own notes on the films, okay, which you've hopefully developed in class. But yeah, really important for section B, you're familiar with the films that you've studied, familiar with the key concepts, familiar with the type of questions that are likely to come up, and trying to do some exam practice. Not necessarily writing out whole answers, but planning out answers, and also having a go at developing paragraphs, so thinking about that point, example, summary idea.